And for today, again, thank you all so much for joining us. Today we're talking about the history of hop blends and all things blends. So I'm going to pass it on over. We have three Yakima Chief Hops representatives, Ralph Woodall, Bryan Pierce, and Chad Roberts. So I'm going to pass it on over to you guys and take it away.
All right, great. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it. Well, I know I've been on a few now, but if you haven't watched any with me in it, I'm Bryan Pierce. I'm our Vice President of North American Sales. And this is my fifth harvest. We're actually surprisingly getting to the tail end of harvest here. But yeah, anyways, who else is with us? I know, Nicole, you mentioned it. Ralph, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, Ralph Woodall, Senior Customer Liaison and hop historian, and been in the business a long time. So going back into starting here back in 1983. So it's been a lot of years, and it's hard to say, is this 37th, 38th, or what is it? And then doing hops as a kid too, so growing up. Anyway, just the main thing is to give some historical perspective as we can on the process too.
Nice. Yeah, that's a few more than my 5 harvests.
Yeah.
Great. And Chad?
Hi, I'm Chad Roberts, Master Planner with Yakima Chief Hops, and this is my 5th harvest as well. So, yeah, welcome.
Nice, nice. Well, it's no mistake. It's the 3 of us in this discussion today talking about blends. And I think maybe if you're not aware, or maybe you don't know us, Ralph, you kind of mentioned you've been around for quite some time and have seen a lot of history with blends. And Chad, being in your master planning role, you're very involved at designing and creating blends, right? So I think we have a really great group here to discuss kind of all things blends today. So I guess with that in mind, as we just want to dive into the topic, is let's talk a little bit about why blends even exist in the first place. So Chad, do you want to kick us off on just kind of?
Sure. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, the theory underlying is it can be various things, but in general, it's looking to create a specific character. Usually, is the origin point of blends. So as Ralph can no doubt walk us through all the history of why we first did them, but really their origin lies in needing to hit something of a consistent type for brewers and their needs. But with the various kind of varietals and lots we have available to us at our scale, it gives us a really broad portfolio to work with to create things that are maybe not more, but different than a single lot or even a blended lot of a single varietal. So I would leave it then to Ralph explain to us the origin of Centennial type.
Yeah, well, what couple things to know on the origins of that is relates to the explosion going on in the craft brewing world back in those days. And so as it was taking off, you had that, and you're dealing with the Centennial basically was released in 1990, and was a super cascade, and it took off really strong with the craft brewing world. And with that takeoff, it was a situation where the supply demand became a major issue on that. And each time they'd be putting in new acreage, then all of a sudden it wouldn't keep up with the true demand and what was going on. So in order to try to continue on with the Centennial type characteristics, we created the Centennial type blend. Basically that blend itself was using sensory characteristics, using lab analysis, alpha betas, HSIs, and prohumulones and oils, and going through some testing to make sure that we would kind of be able to get into a blended nature to be Centennial character. And as it turned out, that became a blend that was Cascade variety, 70% of it, and 30% as a Columbus variety. So you had that combination of that super Cascade nature with the Columbus going in, creating the Centennial nature. It became a blend we've made for many, many years now, and a lot of brewers put it on their physical contracts. And part of that was basically always, every time we turned around, the acreage was going up. And then, but at the same time, we had the amount of demand was exploding as well. So you have that demand going kind of up and down. And then as time went on, you had a situation where every time we turned around, we were doing that. And so we decided to make it into a full-time variety, give brewers a chance to deal with that as well. And so what we did at that point too is knowing that brewers could actually make their own if they wanted to, but could be used some Centennials and Cascades working together. But this allowed us to make that into one process and have 44 pounders, 11 pounders, even get that involved in for some of the homebrew shops and stuff to keep consistency going on. So that's where that came about. So that goes back to, I had a note one here from 2005 update. As many brewers know, some hops are of short supply again this year, like Centennial. We have Centennial type. So that's a situation that you're always in.
Well, and that's what's interesting I find today is we're not in a negative Centennial market generally anymore. You know, there's so many varieties out there that are capturing brewers' attentions that Centennial hums along more or less. It's not super fat, it's not super lean, but what we're able to do is, you know, we could provide all the Centennial people wanted, but we still have people who are consistently wanting Centennial type because it has defined its own nature beyond just the bounds of Centennial. So I think that's a really interesting thing to think that, yeah, how many years since have we continued making Centennial type consistently year over year, despite the availability of Centennial in and of itself? It speaks to the power, I think, of blends in the way that it always, I'm amazed to, know that people have variety, have whole brands, flagships built around Falconer's Flight, which again, kind of in the early history of blends has its origin in the unpredictability and the tumultuous nature, especially in those years of 2010, Ralph, that we got Falconer's Flight going.
Right. Yeah. Back into the Falconer's Flight world, and that's coming into a situation where, we're dealing again with working with that variety to be able to have some specific nature. And so that goes back to a chance to be able to have some characteristics and be blending together, designed specifically for, pale ales and IPAs. And also with Falconer's Flight, it was dedicated for the Glenn Hay Falconer Foundation regarding Glenn Falconer. And that's where you have, value involved in that one. And that's a case where, we have that continualization of that. And then after that, Falconer's Flight, then the next year, 2011, came also with Falconer's 7Cs. So that's a combination of the 7C varieties and just some experimental varieties, just to get some more out there for experimental style beers for people to be able to do some testing and fun things, and also generate basically a donation that we would be making for the scholarships for the Glenn Hay Falconer Foundation. So you got that.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think you guys are touching on a lot of different, topics around blending that I really want to call out. I think, Chad, you mentioned right away, sort of making something with an expression in mind or a goal in mind, or, whether it be flavor, aroma, consistency, right? And I think, Ralph, you mentioned that several times, is that consistency. And I think that's when I think of blending in general and hops, I think that's one of the big values, but it kind of spirals out in a lot of different ways, right? It can be, like you mentioned, Centennial type, maybe dealing with agronomic pressures at the time, right? Or just the growth of the industry beyond available acreage, right? Whatever it might be. And I think that blending and trying to create that flavor or aroma expression again, allowed that growth to continue without necessarily being completely tied to available pounds or acres here growing in the Pacific Northwest. So I think that's a really interesting thing is blending, actually creating something that's not existent, right? Or actually, I guess, trying to recreate something that maybe is just in short supply. But keeping it consistent enough, like you pointed out, Chad, is that, over time, it's sort of grown into its own thing, right? Where maybe it actually does express in a certain way, and you can rely on that consistency year over year to the point where now you're building a flagship beer around it, and you're contracting it because actually you just like what that's offering you. So yeah, I think it's a really big advantages of blending. And actually, I think a lot of the reason, I know historically, Centennial type's a perfect example, I think, to start with, is why it's been around for so long. Because it's as the beer industry's changed, as the hop industry has changed, sometimes there's those voids that need to be filled, right, from a availability standpoint. So, and then I like, looking at that aspect of blends too, like you mentioned with Falconer's Flight. I guess to bring it back to that is then, well, what can we do with blends that maybe actually ties in something a little bigger than beer, right? Or beyond that. And that's doing a donation of some kind, or, making sure that all these hops have a home, they're doing something interesting, like you pointed out, maybe some of that actually came from chasing specific flavors and aromas at the time. But we can still utilize that blend to then further a cause of some kind. So like you mentioned, Falconer's Flight, 2010, actually, originally with Hop Union. But you see, we continue to do those kinds of things today, even, right, with Pink Boots Blend and the Veterans Blend, Ales for ALS, right? There's just a whole group of things now that we're doing that kind of see these different ways that blends impact the industry.
Yeah, I see how they kind of comes out of it. That's why, like when we were talking before, is Falconer's Flight being one of these herb blends, it has informed that, that Hop Union project informed so much of what we've done with, like you said, the Pink Boots and the Veterans Blend, where we've taken the blends out of the hands of myself and Ralph and internal operations and logistics people, and have put that out into the world to let brewers define something that is almost counterproductive to what the blends we create are for, is consistency. That in no way should it even be that like the Pink Boots or Veterans Blend are consistent year over year, which is kind of the whole different perspective of it. But I like that talking about expressions is like, when I was a brewer back in the 2010s, they had, my recollection is that Falconer's Flight is kind of a Simcoe, not replacement, because it, was pushed forward by a company carrying Simcoe as one of its main competitive hops, but in that the market was so short that we needed to put together something that could hit that window, that range. And then now, 10 years since, Falconer's Flight is still going strong, and I would say probably in no way has a resemblance of Simcoe per se, but has defined its own way, that just like Centennial type is no longer bound by the directions of Centennial, I think neither is Falconer's Flight or any of those early blends. They've kind of settled into what they're needing to express, and we've done analysis and sensory and everything to confirm what those blends typify to a certain degree. But yeah, we've definitely then spun out from there into a whole other world of a thing that for a good couple of years gave me a great deal of trepidation, which is putting all these blends out into the hands of brewers. And but we've put structure and format to them so that they fit within the percentages that we can make work, and I can feel good about delivering a consistent, expectable product back out there into the market in basically what is almost akin to the development cycle of a new hop varietal, but in like 8 to 10 months. We basically just like make these people come out with the expression they want, and we do a lickety split job to figure out how much people want out there, and we push, we make it happen, and it goes out, and it generates all these great just accessory benefits. Let alone just blends in and of themselves are, I think, a powerful thing for brewers and for us as hop processors. But they are, that they're also just creating nonprofit value and things that people can find community around and really blend themselves together. All really is just a very powerful and other light one.
There you go.
Oh no, in the dark again.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, hey, I actually with that, it's that's kind of interesting. You're talking about, Chad, the sort of evolution of some of these things, because when you look at Centennial type and Falconer's Flight, right, and we didn't even really mention it yet, but Zythos, right, and all these ones from the past that are still around today, right, looking for that consistency and that year over year, right. Some of them maybe get back to community, like you mentioned. Some are maybe just chasing certain flavor and aroma and beer, but yeah, now with this evolution of involvement of like, what does it mean to have a community blend, is like Pink Boots and Veterans Blend are big deviations, right, from that consistency. Now it's every year the community comes together and creates something new, right, something that didn't exist before. I think that's kind of a whole next story of blends to some degree. For us, maybe if people aren't aware, we look at blends in kind of those two different aspects of expression being, specific to a flavor or aroma, or even within a variety itself, a certain type of expression of that variety, right? And then you have the community blends, which all have some sort of give back or just involvement of the community, right, in creating this blend. And so, Yeah, it's interesting. I know it continues to evolve, and I think we see a lot of that, opportunity and growth of the power of blends in the beer industry. But
Yeah, and Ryan, that's also, with Pink Woods Group and having the actual samples, and then they're doing the rubs and get-togethers, usually at the say at the Great American Beer Fest or some other event that's happening where they get together and have their opportunity to smell the different varieties and then make their blend based on what they choose from, and then we can work around that. And it's an opportunity for involvement. The same thing with the veterans blend situation, where you have, you basically get that process started, and then from there it generates feedback coming back in, and then eventually you get it into production status and starts applying that, and then you want to make sure you're doing it at a particular time where it matches up to the particular event day that they want to have the mass brewing release going on. So but it just really involves that, brewers right into the main frame of the whole process of what's going on.
yeah, I think something too, Ralph, with that is, like you mentioned, the involvement in picking it. Chad kind of touched on this as well, as building some structure around that, right? So we can't just, rub and smell a bunch of hops and somehow put them together, right? It actually takes quite a bit. So I guess, Chad, do you want to walk us through a little bit? Kind of what does that mean?
Sure.
What are those parameters? And
well, yeah, so I'm sure Ralph did a lot of this back in traffic management days, but it's the blend tank is only so big, right? And so luckily up in the Yakima plant per se, where we do the vast majority of our blending, it's a bit larger. It can hold, I'd say, I try to hit no more than 10 bales. I actually hit 10 bales specifically. I have a caveat with Delmer and the crew there, that for blends we can do 10 bales because it's a pushing the upper limit of what will fit in the mix tank. So based on kind of what your understanding is of hop processing, is that we're able to say maybe a whole lot of Falconer's Flight, for instance, is a good example, is maybe 150,000 pounds in total, the whole lot, the finished goods lot number that a brewer will receive. But that gets made in about 2,000 pound chunks. That the blend tank, which is the top one with a big ribbon auger, and the bottom, the feed tank, each hold safely in the range of 2,000 pounds, give or take. So you can put, when a bale is about 200 pounds on average, give or take, in an American bale size, you can put 10 bales into the blend tank and make it work, and not have to be cutting bales and creating inconsistencies and things like that. So then 10 varieties is also just a bit much. I try to stay that's like the absolute max that we would ever do, because then that's only 10% per variety, which I don't think that allows necessarily anything to express in any particular fashion. Nothing waxes, everything kind of wings. It's just a hum. So I mean, we're really looking for, my ideal one is to say 5-7 varieties. Gives you a nice mix. We can be 20-30% of this, and with our minimum ever being like a 10% addition, because below that, I just don't think, from my experience working the bale breaker in the plant, that it's really going to get homogeneously spread across the whole and going to really make some sort of impact. So we kind of want everything in here to be there for a reason. Even at 10%, I think back to the Veterans Blend 2019. We put 10% 472 in there, and at that level, playing with the Simcoe, the Autanum, Equinaut, and Mosaic, it all then just allows it to give like that poof of Sabro-esque or Neo-Mexicanus woody character, but plays agreeably with everything else. So it's really, it's making things work, which is where we've really gotten to with this. We were just working on the Pink Boots blends that will make it to the final table. And it's all, once we got that across, that it's all, as long as it doesn't go below 10%, everything floats, and it works. And so we can make that fit, and we can then, that way, you're using the same growers, the same, number of bales from each lot per blend in those 2,000 pound chunks, so that you can feel secure that from the very first pallet to come off to the very last pallet to come off, you're going to have a consistent blend. that creates a homogeneity. Because I see that just a blend is something that a brewer should, as much as possible, despite the variability of agricultural products, be able to turn the falconer's flight tap and out it comes, you know. So that those ones especially are incredibly big focus for us to maintain the cohesion and the direction and the thought behind the blend, so they are extremely expectable year over year, which is blending as a whole. Then what we're trying to do then with group blends, that's what we try to do to take Simcoe is Simcoe from Idaho, Oregon, Washington, you know, however many dozens of different growers, and that all expresses slightly different early harvest, late harvest. You know, it's astonishing to see it from this side where you're looking at 3 lots from the same farm, sequentially numbered, you know, just bang, bang, bang down on the line, and how different they can be, you know. So we take that and look to then take those differences and blend them together to make a cohesive whole that represents, just like we try to make Falconer's Flight be Falconer's Flight every year. With group blends, we're trying to make Simcoe be Simcoe every year. You know, that people who are your average run-of-the-mill customer is getting high quality, reliable product for whatever varietal they may be purchasing from us. So.
Yeah, so Chad, one other point on the blend itself is when the hops are coming in, we're running analysis on those hops, and we're basically, you know, taking those analysis. And let's say there's a 200 bale lot going on, and you have the first 100 and the second 100, and let's say the one is lower side, the one's higher side, and then that blends together as an average. But if we see that as being an anomaly, the situation, we will actually isolate that first 100, that's its alpha, and the next 100 is that alpha. So we're not combining the higher ending point with the lower front to come up with an average, which really might not show up in that blend program. So when you're running those bales, you know that first batch, that particular lot, there's going to be a little bit lower alpha in that one. And so you don't just put them all along. You might even put, a 1 and 1 if it's a 20% in there going through.
Oh, so, yeah. No, that's what I always think from inheriting, the blend sheet and blending kind of types of my forebears is where, if there are 8 lots in a blend, we are going to try to make those 8 lots be expressing 1 bale each across the entire lot to create that consistency. So one of my favorite things to do is when you've made a blend yourself is go back and check all the lab analysis, since we have a sampling plan and we're testing every 3rd pallet or something. Make sure that what you did to try to balance the variability of those lots has actually came out the other end and shows in a tight range and consistent analysis, sample over sample. It's pretty exciting to see that turn into a real thing, because I think of analytical homogeneity is a different thing from actual physical aromatic and like flavor modern hop character homogeneity, which is more related in my estimation to the physical hops and the existence of that mix being throughout itself.
Chad, could you're touching on something I think I would like to hear you talk more about is outside the analytical homogeneity, but also like you kind of mentioned the sensory homogeneity is when you're looking to make blends. So you mentioned maybe there's 8 different bales going in and you're trying to get that across the entire run, but what are you even looking at when you're considering what bales or what lots should go together into a blend?
I mean, you kind of have to jump over the first ones, the easy ones, which are, well, which warehouse are they in? Though I am a pain in the side of the warehousing team at times where I'm like, sorry, we have to take Yakima lots and we have to get them down to Sunnyside because this is the only way I can make the best mix. It's a disservice to just blend what got delivered up here down there by chance sometimes, which is something I'm, winning friends and influencing others with, but it's incredibly important to me. It just it doesn't how this all comes out that we have our quality balanced across all of the hull we bring in and push back out through the pellet lines and the cryo plants and everything is it's my other children. It's my literal produce in my mind of, what we're trying to do on the planning side of coordinating all this to eliminate headaches and eliminate logistical hurdles, but also be doing everything we can to maintain that leadership in quality to the brewer. And it's through, I think, sometimes Pete was saying, sometimes you guys just got to think like normal people, but like it's being overwrought. It's being just caring a little bit too much about hop minutia, I feel, is what the strength we bring as a team of being people who are passionate about beer, passionate about hops, and having to do it as a full-time job. So it's taking that, I then look towards, it's different things. I'll make group blends in a couple different ways. There'll be ones where I very much like to mix the three states together when possible. I am almost a stickler in opposition of a single lot, expression in. I like to the most, if possible, to be mixing the, especially like Citron Mosaic, mixing in Oregon and Idaho into our Washington, volumes, so that we're getting the different ways these play coming together to create something that is very expectable and reliable. Because I find they all express a little bit differently, and then even different regions of the Yakima Valley. I can't say that I'm an expert on who's growing what and whose farm is in the Willamette Valley or the Treasure Valley or Elk Mountain, but I do have a bit of that for the Yakima Valley, having lived here. So I will look towards the lower valley at times if I need to find something, maybe mixing Wyckoff with Roy, making sure that we don't just make an expression of this variety that's just in this direction. But, like Simcoe is a good example. Simcoe is maybe multiple things, right? You've got that classic pine, the little note of dank, some grapefruit, So with all the robust, especially it's become a lot easier as we've developed an incredibly robust sensory program, where it used to be a lot of, we all were doing the harvest sensory ourselves and writing it down on a piece of paper. And I would have to, find whatever I could. But there is definitely a lot to the grower. The grower has kind of a brand of that variety. So like, I know that like I want to mix, I want to mix some Carpenter and some Peralt and some Loftus together, especially when it's those big three original brands, the Simcoe, the Citron, Mosaic, with those growers having defined the characteristics of those hops, to the market so long ago. I think they still maintain an important piece and almost a tentpole of those varieties. But we're getting a lot of interesting different versions of those varieties from 3D and from Gooding and from all over. So I like to do things that are hitting a certain profile by mixing different farms together, make farm specific blends to kind of highlight the romance of that, but create a larger volume than a single lot would be, and a little bit of consistency inside there. Or it's just making something that hits all sides of that variety. Making sure you've got lots in there that typify each of the like main hearty characteristics of it. For me, Simcoe's like bubblegum, juicy fruit, just classic pink bubblegum. So getting that with some pine, with some grapefruit in there is making a Simcoe that, as I'll joke, is the Simcoe tap, is the off-the-shelf Simcoe that people should be able to buy and rely on. So, I mean, it's a lot of things, and it just kind of depends what the volumes we're looking at, what we're looking at regarding how much we've created grower-wise from selection. We'll do a lot with carrying forward selections that are made. So when it comes down to the blends, it's making something that is as homogeneous and consistent as possible. That's what we're like. We're just finishing Centennial. Oh man. We're very eco-friendly here. We've got all the light sensors, but we're finishing off Centennial. So I said, well, take every Centennial lot that's remaining and put those together. And what does that look like? Okay, now let's break that into two things so that we can make them both at the right points, hitting things such as, I'm sure maximum residue limits, is it? is not something on the forefront of everyone's minds, but we have some other things that are in our consideration as well that are kind of beyond taste. So.
Yeah, and that's also helps into the future for the spot sales and somebody that's buying there and buying as they go along. They have that continuity that's built into it, so they're not like every time they place it, it's another standard for the Centennial nature. So you're getting that blend that works it together, so that it gives that continuity and over the brewing year for the people that aren't contracting or buying large quantities, but every time they place an order, they know they have that faith that's been put into the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to hear, that every level you're thinking about, how does this go together, right? Like within this crop year, what was it like this year, right? And then what was it like in Oregon and Idaho and Washington? And then what was it like in those growing regions within those growing regions? And then I think, mixing that with our sensory analysis and lab analysis, and then what are the standards, right, of alpha, beta oil, right? What, trying to also make sure that we're keeping, if you have a bunch of lots that are really high or really low, right, that we're also making sure that they're somewhat normal, like you're pointing out, Ralph, that if you buy it on spot, ideally you'd get something that is very similar to what maybe you had on contract, right, or vice versa, so that it's not, rolling the dice every time you get a different lot or something like that. So it's interesting. It's like taking all of those different factors in and a lot of the agronomics of it and trying to get it down into like a single usable product that you would, as a brewer, right, that it's what you expect out of it. But yeah, that's interesting, Chad. You're looking at a lot of different things all the time there.
Yeah, it's a bit much at times. Yeah, there's definitely it's just that is what we do in planning, is just try to keep an eye on all these other things so that other people can just go on and do their jobs, and we'll worry about all these 8 things that you have to keep in mind to keep it straight. But I mean, yeah, like you said, there's highs and lows, and we need to standardize. There's you might think that like, oh, but the highest high, that's got to be like the je ne sais quoi. No, that's not that variety. That's not typical of that variety, and it's not sensible to tout that or release that as an exemplar of that variety. In all reality, when you balance that against other lots you've got, that's how you're going to make that consistent. I mean, that's the real thing that we as a hop broker do to provide for the customer is do that work for them. Make sure they don't have to they don't have to come, they don't have to like walk through a field, albeit, as you can see, we're in my rich palatial hop yard. You're welcome to come. We'd love to have you out here when it's not like it is now. But it's definitely something where you have reliability. I as a brewery owner myself have built. This hasn't eroded my faith in Yakima Chief hops. This has only built it up further and further working here, knowing all the effort we're putting in at all these levels from the procurement side on. I mean, I don't even know that world. There is a whole wealth of effort that they're putting in on that procurement side that we're receiving the bounty of, to be able to, luckily, year over year, have a really nice mix of stuff to blend off. We don't have a lot of sticks in our eyes. We've just got like, golly, how do I deal with all this wealth of riches? All the varieties we have, especially for when you're talking not about group blending, but just about like making new blends, like the Cryo Blend, like these new trials and generating new expressions. I think that's where the variety of things we handle, and at our scale, it allows us a lot of latitude that is very exciting.
Yeah, one thing too, within our hop data booklet, they basically have the alpha, beta, HSIs, and so forth, and that actually, we'll show those variances, alpha 11.5 to 15 in any given year, or depending on the particular year. So those are things that we want to make sure that people are aware that we have Mother Nature at play at times. We have different things that's come on. We have basically the state regional areas within the state as far as growing conditions and what's going on at any point. So we always keep that in mind as well. So I think that's the main thing, is just showing the brewers there, the people that are in the meeting here today, that it's not just an easy thing. It has to be looked at and dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in it, as you're touching on it, it provides a ton of value too, right? I think, we always kind of joke that it's best as soon as it comes off the farm, and it's our job not to mess it up, right? But at the same time, some of those lots, they do fall as outliers maybe, or they express very, in just one way, right? Or something like that. And so there is some value to it, not just trying to maintain that, right, and not mess it up, but actually putting some of those components together in a way that it suddenly is actually adding value for everyone that's going to end up using it. So it's not just a very one-note lot maybe, or it's not extremely high alpha, maybe beyond what you'd expect, which might sound good up front, but then actually maybe changes how we're going to use it. If you get a Simcoe that's way above 15, like you pointed out there, Ralph, that range, that actually could be detrimental when you're doing your recipe, right? Or if something's way too low too, right? And then having to kind of adjust for that. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's, Chad, you kind of touched on it, and I guess where I want to kind of go next with some of this discussion is the Cryo Blend and other things like Pacific Crest is where are we headed with blends too, right? Where do we see the future of blends? And I think, everything that we're talking about now, right, that will always need to happen, right? We have those vagaries of agronomics every year, and Mother Nature, and even this year we're throwing a lot of curveballs, right? And so needing, I think, to work around that and create something consistent for the industry. But I think you kind of touched on the Cryo Blend. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about what are we looking at now, when it comes to analytics and how we're designing blends to express.
Yeah, that's where, I mean, the stuff that's gone into that it's of a whole nother level than anything we've ever done. At best, in the older blends, we would be looking at the GCMS, the oil profiles, of the various terpenes in the lots and varieties going into it. And we would be using that to target this, goal, keeping varieties at this percentage, that percentage. But where we've got all these survivables, thiols, all the stuff that our technical solutions department is doing is taking all of this to just a whole nother level of just expectable consistency, where, there's a bit of it when we used to make a blend, or like when we make Pink Boots and a Veterans blend, there's a little bit of rolling some dice, of like, yeah, we'll rub some of the lots of hops together and we'll smell them, we'll grind them together. Like, I like this is good. But there's some uncertainty of how that's going to come out the other end, especially on the beer side, where with what we're doing to develop the cryo blends, it's going through brewing trials. It's taking, we've made a great number of different one-off cryo, single varietals that then can be blended together at different proportions to proof whether or not this actually makes it into something that'll impact the character of the beer. So, I mean, I like thinking about this far other pole versus Centennial type, where Centennial type is looking to, it's an expression, but it's looking to express something that exists, where the possibilities of cryo blending and just there's other blending using the new analytical technologies and focuses in R&D we have can allow who knows what, I mean, is we can hit something perhaps as consistent as, a fruit character year over year, that you'd be able to expect that this is going to, and it might even mean that the same varieties are not in that blend year over year, not the same farms, not the same lots, because we can just take whatever the analytics show as far as the thiols, the survivables that'll be in there, and put them into a blend that we can have a pretty high degree of certainty how it'll end up making someone's beer taste. Which, despite, we were talking about this, I was in a car with a friend, and we were just like, hops are not wine. They're not they're not grapes. It's like a beer named Citra is not a wine named Syrah. Citra, a beer is so many more things than the sum of its hops. You've got yeast, malt, all the techniques that can go into that, all the times you can add the hops. It makes it something far beyond some of the other alcohols, varietals per se, but it allows for this incredible allow of expression by the brewer themselves. They're the X factor in it all. So it's interesting to make a blend that almost even looks to overcome that and create something that, if the brewer is using it in this way, it will be this way. I mean, that's pretty astonishing for that to be able to be coming out. And yeah, it's really, after last year's trial of that, I'm looking forward to how much we can, you know, build on top of that this year, and just take that technology and be putting it into other blends we make, and just expand that portfolio. Because I think Falconer's Flight and Centennial type, these are proofs of concept that persist this long, showing, well, there's something about these blends, you know, maybe these aren't too bad of an idea. Maybe we should keep doing these. And I think all the adoption that the industry has proven for them is, we're on the right track.
Yeah, one other quick one, Chad, regarding the process of timing of the pelletization and so forth, and the hop storage index, and certain varieties are more susceptible to deterioration in time. So we have to make sure that we know certain varieties that if you wait 3 to 4 months out, you don't have the same. So that's also where you have to look at the processing, and where now we're doing more processing earlier in the year as well, keep up with demand. And then we're also being aware that, hey, wait a minute, this one's the key up point. We got to make sure to get these in the house quick, and get those in the process as well, to capture that nature. And not oil process, but also the alpha characteristics. And so that's something we always were keeping an eye on. Wait a minute, now let's get these in the mix, man. You don't turn around in January, find, wait a minute, we should have run those back here.
Yeah, no, that's why, like, I make sure now any blends we we make that have volatile varieties in them, Centennial, Equinox, Columbus, CTZ, what did I do? But that they all get, that those blends get ran earlier. We're definitely looking to keep twisting the screws and keep making these things tighter and tighter and more consistent. But yeah, that's that volatility index in how hops run is definitely a fascinating thing to just see develop year over year, as we're like, nope, hey, that new variety that everyone loves, yeah, you got to do that this long ago. Or there's ones we're finding where there's almost a processing window that if you run this hop before, if it's not a month from harvest and you start pelletizing it, you're going to retain unpleasant, characteristics that, like, even though my old joke is everything that's good in hops is screaming to get out of them the second it comes off the vine, there's maybe something more to that than just a simple turn of phrase of mine, that there is things that you need to let go. There are unpleasant volatile characteristics that are better left in the air around the pellet plant. So it's definitely fascinating. I can imagine that, that was a big headache of yours in traffic, I imagine, Ralph.
And we had, back in the days, we had what's known as a fragile alpha. So your fragile alpha would be an alpha that comes in super high against what the normal would be. And then, all right, we really made it good, but then it has a fragile alpha. You're getting ready to run it, and then you do the reanalysis prior. Where did it go? So that's where you have to keep that in mind too. And that's where we're continually doing those alpha runs and double checking happening. And like you're saying, also during the runs, making sure that what you're saying is going in is coming out into the pellet form, reinforcing that, and time out if there's not, or you have an identification of a mix point going on. But I think that's the main thing. I've never get that getting caught on a variety that would be way too high, and then you're thinking you got it together, and then right before the run, so it's a woo.
Ooh, yeah, Fragile Alpha. I like that's a beer name.
Yeah, right on. It's right there.
Nice. I guess with that in mind, is that something that, Chad, you're thinking a lot about when it comes to making blends, like some of the ones we mentioned, like community blends, all that, like how do they factor into the timing of production?
Yeah, I mean, there is some limitations. It's like, right now our goal is with Centennial, an extremely fragile alpha, if I'm trying to like get Centennial blended with like, I don't know, Idaho 7 or something that is very distant into the delivery future, that might not necessarily line up. You might not want to try to hit these two incredibly opposite goals at the same time. But luckily we have a number of pellet plants, and we have ways that I haven't run into that too much. We can basically balance if we get any blend containing Centennial out within a reasonable amount of time. that it's going to have retained its character. And to navigate that, we can also look to target certain lots that are lower in HSI. You know, we get Centennial across the board per se, but for blends, you know, if we have something we need to sit on for a month or so, we can make sure we picked one of the ones that's a little more stable, and we get all that really fragile stuff into the mix. I think we've almost guessed what the interval at which this light turns off. I think it's got about 10, 15 minutes, but so
Right.
we should be good for the rest of it. So yeah, you know, luckily not too much. Luckily we are a really developed company and have a lot of infrastructure and warehousing, and we can navigate around that. But and luckily, I think just a lot of the heritage blends that I inherited didn't try to be a bad time right off the bat. So.
Yeah, I think what you're saying to me, it stands out is that, and it's something I think is definitely like a feeling sometimes in the industry, that blending, right, is a way for hop suppliers to maybe deal with things that are less than desirable. But I think what you're telling me now, right, is that like, well, actually, we're looking at HSIs of the things that, even if they do need to sit, we're going to target specific things to maintain as much quality as possible, right? And we're only blending within this crop year. We're looking at taking the specific lots, and depending on when they get run, we may actually handpick which lots to make sure that we have the best outcome, right? And so they're completely made with that quality and consistency in mind, right? And that we want it to be just as nice as a single run of a single variety or something like that.
Oh yeah, maybe even more so. Yeah, I mean, it's specifically I was just hunting through. I have to find like really high alpha cascade, you know, for some of the blends or something. I need to, and I try to stay to the same farmer year over year, so we can build that expectability into it, you know, and really look to hit. Okay, well, what variety did we use last year, and what lot? Okay, what's the sensory on that one from last year? What's all of its analytical data? Let's peruse the. You know, we might be taking things off the table and out of this, you know, contention for selection because they're needed for this consistent expression of a blend. You know, no, we are definitely not to probably the panel builders at times. We are not leaving anything behind. We are taking what needs to be taken and keeping every stakeholder in mind when we do that. But yeah, we are definitely, there's cherry picking it going on. It's no doubt.
So, Bryan, a quick one for you. Just to check on, there had been some questions, you know, there had been
there we go.
Yeah, it's a good timing here. I think actually as we get close to the end of this hour, let's maybe
the other one is we've actually have addressed a lot of that already. So that's a case where you'll be able to hear some of the past insights. So
yeah, definitely. I think one we didn't really touch on, I think is a good question, is are there guidelines in which hop combinations don't work well together? So is that something that enters your world at all?
Yeah, I don't really, but Ralph, do you have any estimation of that? Does that make anything pop into your mind?
It automatically doesn't, you know, over the period of time, you know, basically we were dealing with, you know, not as many varieties at any point in time. And then having been out of it for several years, it doesn't register in my brain as being one that now the nuance character today probably would be sensory characteristics and also analysis, where you might be able to have a better definition. But from my past, it was basically based on common basic varieties, keep it going forward, and then not having any real sense of that particular question.
Yeah, that's what I've heard that from a couple different sources, that question, and it kind of it took me for a little loop because like I mean I can't think of any off the bat, but I mean, is it because we're just not necessarily thinking of that way because we're not blending what we have to, we're blending what we want to generally. So in that way I think of it like there might be just hop varieties, like if they don't work good together in an IPA, then they're probably not going to work good together in a blend necessarily. But I mean, also with the number of varieties we're putting in there, I mean, despite like not everybody puts 7 hop varietals into the mix of a hop bill for an IPA. So that may be where some that might not work together, well, they do when they're just a 10% of the overall or something, and they just add like a subtle, you know, hint. It's just like, just eat salt. That's not great. Let's not do 50% salt, 50% pepper. Let's find this mixture of onion and garlic and all these things. where there is a bit of where it's kind of like building a dish, and in that a lot of times when we're making a blend, one variety is the dominant portion of it per se, and it's got the, not the majority, it doesn't have, nothing has 50% of one variety, but it has all these different things kind of flexing together to create subtle nuances and to support or boost the characters of the other hops in there, and somehow it comes out through the other end, and it all seems to generally work. I mean, yeah, I try to think of like Equinaut is like Equinaut and Sabro, maybe those, but I don't know if we put those in several blends and they work well together.
It's like 7 C's is one where we have the 7 C's, and you've already talked about identifying in there. There may be some varieties that of the 7 C's that you want to make sure to, focus on certain ones as opposed to too many of them.
Yeah. It's like, just like, again, I guess it's the then counterpoint to the other question: are there specific blends that always work best together? Not that I've seen in my estimation. I see, Cascade, of course, plays well with other hops. Simcoe plays well with other hops, and I think it's just always good to have some varieties in there that are kind of more baseline, kind of not over exerting, but then I love having a portion of Equinaut, or like in that Veterans Blend 472, but I'm also totally into having some Autanum or some Palisade, having hops that are a little bit more regarded neutral or subtle, but when blended into that whole mix, they become something greater.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think in general, I mean, when we're thinking of blending hops, they're all hops, right? And so it's not like like your dish example. We're not taking completely different things and putting them together necessarily. So I think they all go together well, right? I don't think there's one that's a combination out there that's just like, wow, that creates something terrible. But I think it's just sort of like what's good and what's great, right? And what really shines through. A couple of hops together could just taste like a couple different hops together. And I think where we're seeing that future blending, like we talked about earlier with the Cryo Blend and other things, is starting to really dive into specific chemical compounds or oil compounds, things like thiols, things that survive well through the process, right? And ultimately trying to put those together in a combination that really creates a whole that's bigger than the sum of its parts, right? And so I think that's where I think it's beyond, right, than just, these are these two hops together and it tastes like if I would have put them together in my beer in my house, right? It's just now they're pre-blended for me, right? It's actually doing something beyond what maybe each of those hops could do on their own.
Yeah, and then they're doing whatever they do together in the bag, and that's what, like, and then so the other one, it's the trend in chemical breakdown. I mean, not that I can speak to. I think, like Ralph said, we definitely want to balance volatility if we're setting together a time bomb for ourselves. But I think aside from just knowing anecdotally from some papers that there is a certain amount of positive oxidation that can occur, which is just invariably occurring, because to whatever degree, there's the hop storage index, the HSI, is the measure of oxidation. There's no zero oxidized hops. It's just not a thing. They're just slowly burning, or like a swiftly wilting flower, as I'll call them. But it's more about the lot. It's more about those expressions of those lots working together that really go to make the whole thing work. Like even with the Veterans Blend, where we have to blend, the panel has to do the work with previous crop year pellets or tone retains we carry over. We then use all of their impressions to find something from the current crop that is typifying all those targets they want, and it, when possible, going to the same farm, state, whatever, and finding something akin to it. So yeah, that's it's curious. Yeah, no, the analogy is like, is there like, things that work, mayo and ice cream? I don't know. Maybe it's we have the right mayo and the right ice cream, and it's beautiful.
Well, nice. Well, I know we have just a couple minutes here, and I think that's all the questions. But Ralph, you had sent me some pictures. Did you want to, maybe if anyone hung out this long, you get a special treat here at the end. Did you want to share some of these, or I can pull them up on the screen?
Yeah, so I don't have access to them, but if you can put them on a screen, by say,
I'll do that. Coming up right now. Oh, get the first one going. Hopefully you can see that.
There he is. All right, having a good time, right?
Yeah. All right, there we go. Man, it's really taking a while to load here. Ah, all right,
Yes.
There you go. You should see that now.
Yeah, basically going back to the Falconer's flight and the foundation and the first years and the winners, and that's Ralph Olson, who used to be the head of the part owner of the Hop Union, CBS LLC, and then that's the Sasquatch, Glenn's hop head, so that's a good one. You got the fish brewing, and that goes back into probably about 2005, for the foundation winner. And they'd have the scholarship awards going on each year, and they have the contest to see the different brewers that submit their in. And then part of that foundation would give them opportunity to participate in the scholarships going with the Siebel Institute in brewing studies and so forth.
Nice. Here I got another one.
Yeah, and then going into the Sasquatch Fest, which recognizes Glenn's world in called the Sasquatch, big tall guy, so going forth. So every year they'd have the festival going on, and that brings everybody together to celebrate, Glenn and his world. And that's also part of the foundation. And that's when that scholarship program comes during that period of time. So that goes into a yearly event that's going on.
Ralph, we kind of touched on in the beginning, but could you, with just a couple of minutes we have left here, I'll keep an eye for any new questions, but could you tell us a little bit more about kind of the foundation and kind of the history of this blend?
Yeah, so going back into that, I've written some notes here. We've got Glenn A. Falconer, born in 1961 and basically passed away in 2002. And so he started as a home brewer from the Cascade Brewer Society. And basically at one point started working a little bit there with Steelhead Brewing out of Eugene with Terry Farndorf, who was the head brewer. He completed the Siebel course, brewing technology in 94. He moved over to Newport, Oregon, where he worked for Rogue Ales. And then in 96, he moved back into Eugene and started working for the Wild Duck Brewery. And he was the head brewer there. He basically had earned a lot of recognition of being the high beer, high hop character, high alcohol points, and he had that sudden passing, but he had won two basically back-to-back gold medals at the GABF 2002 and 2003 for his old gnarly head barley wine. So he had that nature to him, and so after he had passed away, basically his father formed the Glenn Hay Falconer Foundation in 2004, recognizing his role in the Northwest brewing community. And then from there, they established the scholarship program, which is an annual program, and then started up with the Sasquatch Brew Fest in order to celebrate Glenn's world. And so he was a friend of mine that goes way back in time, and we remember seeing him back and forth, and never forgot Glenn. And I want people to understand that that's what he is, and he is with us still today, brewing away.
Yeah, and then it was Jesse Umbarger, who had worked with Glenn previously brewing, and then was one of our sales leadership people here in Hop Union at that time, had developed the idea with, who else was involved in the development of that blend, if you remember, Ralph?
That would have been back in the days when there would have been one of our, his name particularly is, it doesn't come to mind, but he was in one of our pilot brewers back in those days. And so he was one that was, well, they were actually working on samples and what going on, so there. But I think more than anything, it was the fact that, that Jesse brought that into the fold here as a way of recognition. Now, Olson had been involved with the event going on, and Ralph retired in basically 2010, and that's when Don Bryant came in, and that's when in 2010, that's when the Falconer flight took off at that point. And I think a lot of it, exactly right, was Jesse's involvement in that role.
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks for that, the history. And I think that's good. I know, I definitely think it's been around long enough that there's so many brewers who've entered the market that maybe, never knew Glenn or the history, or maybe never worked with Hop Union. And so I think it's always nice to hear and kind of frame that, just because some people might not know, right? They might not know what what that story is or why the blend exists. So that's
yeah,
great.
they're saying that they've had 47 brewer scholarships that have been awarded out so far too. So think of a lot of brewers that have benefited from that project over the years. So, and that we were able to get involved with it and stay involved.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it looks like we're right on an hour here, so it's probably a good time to wrap things up. So thank you guys very much. Nicole put some good notes in the chat. So if you want to learn more about blends, we actually have all of our product sheets and all of our blends on our website. You can go there. It's under brewing tools. There's product sheets, so you can get a little more information about each of them, see what's available. And then too, when Chad was talking through kind of the blend tank, the mixing tank, right, stuff like that in the facility, if you're maybe not familiar with that or you've never seen it, you know, hopefully you will one day in the future come to Yakima and see that. But if not, we have a video that was out last week, which is a pellet plant tour. So it's a great reference if you want to go back and watch that, because you can kind of see it all, you know, as Salvador walks through it. So, but all right, awesome. Well, thank you guys both very much. I appreciate the conversation. Always enjoy hanging out with you guys.
Fun time. Been good.
Likewise.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It was a great session, and thank you guys all for hopping on and joining us today for this panel discussion on blends. Just a reminder, this session was recorded and it'll be available here within the hour on virtualharvest.com. So you'll be able to view it there, or as well as in the Whova app. And then if you do have follow-up questions, or for those that didn't watch this live, please email brewschool@yakimachief.com and we'll get to your questions. And also if you have any brewing questions or specific blend things to use, stuff like that, you can also email brewinghelp@yakimachief.com. Other than that, again, thank you all so much. Hope to see you on the next session. We have more coming up every day this week. Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right,
Bye.
bye everyone.
Bye.